Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining my talk on cultivating B2B passion for product managers. My name is Emily Patterson, and I'm the Senior Product Manager at Kenna Security, a B2B SaaS platform for monitoring security risks for our clients. Prior to Kenna, I worked on an immigration legal services platform, a health insurance shopping platform, and a healthcare reference and tool platform. So I have a lot of experience working in complex B2B environments. Over the course of my career, I've learned that the hardest aspect of switching jobs as a PM is getting up to speed and adding value quickly. So today I'll be talking about my strategies for quickly onboarding to a new B2B industry, becoming passionate about your product and your customers, and how to convert that passion to customer retention and product growth. When I started in B2B software, I was charged with building out a new platform for small doctors' offices, so they could access tools like EHRs, EMRs, diagnostic reference tools, and e-prescription tools. I found it really difficult to get in my users' minds. I wasn't a doctor, and I wasn't a physician's assistant, and I actually like technology. So it took me about 6 months to really understand what problem I was trying to solve with the product, and another 6 to 12 months to really understand my users' problems and what they needed and wanted. When I transitioned to health insurance, I did not do much better, although at least I had personal experience with looking at health insurance plans and working with health insurance companies from my previous work experience. So when I got to immigration, I knew I had to really strategize how I onboarded since it's such a complex domain and I am certainly not a lawyer. So I could shorten my time from day one to making an impact. From that experience, I was able to progressively improve my onboarding plan in subsequent positions and really refined my strategy. So when I came into kind of security in the InfoSec space, which is definitely the most complex field I've ever worked in, I was able to ramp really quickly. So here's what I do. The first key onboarding step is to do your research, your industry research before day one. In the weeks between when you accept the position and your first day, start reading what your customers read, blogs, books, white papers, that sort of thing. When I had to learn immigration, I studied the U.S. Immigration Wikipedia page for hours on end to make sure I get all the classifications correct. Another important step for research is to start following some leading voices on social media. So leading up to my first day at Kenna Security, I started a Twitter account and I started following all of these big voices in security, which really started to get me a good feel for the lingo and start identifying some of the attitudes and biases that were pretty common in the industry. So I could already start to kind of feel for what sort of features would be wanted and desirable by our customers. Day one at a new company can be really overwhelming, but sometime in the first week, I would say be sure to ask engineering or architecture to give you an overview of your data model. Even if you're not a technical PM, getting an idea of how all of your data fits into your system can be really helpful when designing features and understanding how people use your app. This was one thing I didn't value enough, I think, in my career until I got to InfoSec. And when I got to InfoSec, it was really clear to me that if I didn't learn my data model, all of my acceptance criteria would be pretty much garbage because it just would not be supported by how we were architected. So taking the time to really understand that shaved off a lot of pain and suffering I encountered in my initial grooming sessions with my teams. If you're lucky enough to be starting at a company that has already got written personas, those are a great resource, right? So read them, memorize them, ask probing questions about them, determine how up to date they are. So if they're older than 2 years, a good exercise is to try and rewrite them yourself and do it as comprehensively as you would if you didn't have anything. Do all the research, talk to your people, do the photos, do the attitudes, do the likes and dislikes to really kind of get into your users and your customers' heads. Even if you get some of the details wrong, it's a great learning experience as people point out like some gaps or some errors or things like that, and you can always make changes. If you have good personas already set up, or if you write your own personas, a really great exercise is to walk through your product as each of those personas would. So go through all the use cases that each of your personas generally use and get a good feel for what they're trying to accomplish in your product and how they're using it and how they're leveraging it. Similar to CrossFit, the more reps you get in using your product, the stronger you're going to be as a product manager. So anytime you can go in and use your app, the better. On that same message, regardless of how much research you do prior to starting your new position, to get really comfortable with being a product manager, you need to actually use your product. As a B2B product manager, that's really tough to do, right? Because you are not necessarily a lawyer or a human resource person or a benefits person. So it can be really tough to actually go through those workflows if you don't know anything about them. But really good product managers constantly click through their product, are constantly giving demos, constantly are using their applications. So work with your engineering team, get a good robust demo account that has good demo data set up in it, so you can do smoke tests, and don't be afraid to go in and break things. That's where you do a lot of your learning, and you can find corner cases and edge cases that you didn't even think about prior to starting that can be a little bit more obscure. Those kind of obscure corner cases I found can really reveal insights about your customers. For instance, recently I realized that we had a CSV upload feature, and a couple people use it, but not a lot of people use it. And the people who do use it for one thing and one thing only. And it gets me thinking, like, well, if they're using this kind of uploader, what other sorts of tools could we use? What other features could we build to support that use case? So those kind of things can be really, really helpful in identifying new features. So now that you have an idea of who your customers are and how your product works, it's a good time to go meet your customers. This is really important for any product manager. I think anybody who's kind of drunk the Kool-Aid on product management knows that it's important to go talk to your customers. This can be really intimidating in B2B, to be honest with you, because customers are hard to reach. Sometimes you're working with people way up the food chain of big companies. They don't have time for you. Other excuses like that. A good strategy here that I found is to make friends with people in your customer success department. And they can actually help introduce you to friendly customers who maybe they talk to on a regular basis, or who they spend more time with, who need more care and feeding. Sometimes it's easier to get a good relationship built with those people because they're already pretty well engaged with your company. There's usually a few customers who spend more time with the CS team. They usually have a good opinion of your product because they're getting more service and they're asking more questions. Start with those folks. Shadow CS calls. That's a really nice way to do it and kind of get yourself introduced. Feel free to play the I'm new here card. Ask lots of questions about their workflow, their assumptions, what they need, and especially listen for their pain. Like, why are they calling customer success so often? Where are their problems? Is it a common problem? Those sorts of questions. Another way to meet customers is on sales calls. Generally, in my experience, salespeople are pretty friendly with product folks, since we're the ones who say yes to customer feature requests. So ask your salespeople to pull you in to listen, or to shadow them on sales calls. Just try and hang out and listen to what folks are saying and the questions they're asking. You'll probably start hearing the same things over again. And that's a really important thing to kind of identify your most common use cases and identify big concerns that people have. A good example here at Kenna, when we first started, there was a lot of concern around people's concern we were talking about in the sales cycle were how we're doing on patching. So how are we patching things? And gradually recently, this last year, it's moved to how can I avoid being in the news for a data breach? So it kind of signifies to me as a product person that we're moving up market a little bit more to more of a CISO audience. So as we're getting into enterprise accounts, those folks are more focused on what we really need to manage the whole business. So custom reports, bird's eye view UIs, benchmark scores, all of those features are coming out of identifying and talking to this new upmarket CISO audience that we're talking to in sales calls. Another great resource for getting close to your customers is your analytics platform on your app. Hopefully everyone has one of those. They're instrumental, I would say, for product folks. Hopefully you've picked one that can show you each step your user is taking, or at least what they are commonly clicking. It's really important to see people's natural workflows and where they tend to get stuck and where they most often click. And kind of really getting a good feel for that can be super helpful to identify the most common things that people are looking at, to give you some materials for maybe your first user story, your first feature at your new position. One piece of advice I give new PMs when you're onboarding is to not be afraid to fail, but also be sure to fail pretty fast. What I like to do is identify the highest value use case for your product, start looking at those features in depth, end to end, get really expert level on them, and then start proposing a few small enhancements to those features, some small tweaks, maybe a new UI element here, a new button there, something along those lines. Keep it really small. Keep it something relatively minimal effort. Something that maybe the rest of the organization would say that's really low value. Why are we doing this? But it's a really key step, I think, for product managers to start learning their product and their industry, right? So the more input you get on those sorts of first features, the more you're going to learn about your app, about your product, about your customers. So even if you don't end up doing the feature, that's totally fine. The exercise is what's really important, because you're learning what people are doing and how they're using the product as you're getting feedback off of your proposal. So that's where the value is in that. And remember, every no is a learning experience. There's no embarrassment. You're onboarding as a new product manager. Your job is to ask a lot of questions, propose a lot of potentially dumb features, and hopefully with all that done, you're writing your first tickets in 3 weeks or so, which I think is generally a good mark for product managers. Finally, in the PM journey, you need some buddies. Everyone knows that. Product managers are usually social people, and usually we find that customer success people are excellent resources. They are generally your subject matter experts. They know your product inside and out. They talk to your customers all the time. Becoming really good close friends with some of those people is important, I think, for a product manager. Sales, like I mentioned, is also really important. And then people that you don't really tend to think of. You're a product manager. Make sure that you introduce yourself and get familiar with your C-suite. Make sure that your CEO knows who you are. This is easier done in smaller companies than bigger companies, but it helps to know who's making the ultimate decisions and where their preferences and ideas lie. There's always a PM horror story out there about a feature that got 95% of the way developed, and then the CEO got wind of it, decided he didn't like it, and then nixed the whole thing. And if you know your CEO and you know what they like and they dislike, maybe you can avoid that a little bit more. But overall, remember, SMEs exist everywhere in the organization. I've found really great allies anywhere from regional sales to product marketing to our CTO. So the more people you can talk to, the better, and you get different perspectives on the company and your customers. And if you can talk to all those people in the first month, that's great. If you take a little bit longer time, that's fine too. It'll just help you get up to speed faster and allow you to start writing some of those stories and getting some of your features out there. So now you know your product, you know your user. What's next? I think in order to be an effective and optimal product manager, you need to have a burning passion for your product and your users' problems. Unfortunately, in B2B SaaS, that can be really hard to do. It can be hard to find that passion because you're not, in almost all cases, the target market for your app. So how can you be expected to go to the mat for these people if you don't really understand them? The first key I found is to figure out your customer's alternative to your solution. In many industries, at least in my industries, the alternative was spreadsheets. I joke sometimes that my life calling is to reduce Excel's installation base. For most B2B products, the reason they were created is because it's painful for your customers to do their work with the existing options, right? So that's the whole reason that your app was probably created, is because the way that previously the work was being done wasn't great. So for example, when I worked in immigration services, the alternative to our SaaS solution was working with a traditional immigration lawyer, where pricing was variable, timelines were uncertain, communication was not clear or consistent. So to break into that market, we knew that was the before solution, and that before solution really struggled in those areas. So we knew the SaaS offering had to have clear upfront pricing, SLAs for case preparation times, a message center, and detailed notifications that lets a customer decide how much or how little communication they want about their cases. All those things come out of knowing what kind of pain your customers were in before you got there. So how did we figure that out? It helps to have experts on staff. In our case, we had a whole team of immigration lawyers who had done it the old way, and they knew all of the problems that they encountered and all the hoops they had to jump through and all the lag times in communication that happened. They can really give you an insider look on how they used to do it. There are usually experts like this at every B2B SaaS organization. Sometimes it's the CEO, the founder, sometimes it's the CTO, sometimes it's down in the support roles. If you worked in a sales enablement platform, for example, I'm sure any of your salespeople could give you a detailed insight about other sales enablement features and plans and technologies that they've used before and in the past. So when you find these people, make sure to spend time talking to them, interview them casually about what they liked and disliked about their old workflow. Both have merit, both what they liked and both what they didn't like. Build that relationship with someone in the field. You can start to build empathy with them and really understand maybe what they like as far as workflows or UI. People will drop hints about that in casual ways. So make sure you're using your active listening skills and key in on themes like how resistant are they to change, if they prefer images or words, if they read a lot, or if they tend to skim things. Overall tech savviness is a good gauge to figure out when you're talking to your customers or people who used to work in the field. A good example of this, when I worked on our healthcare platform, our organization employed several physicians. Then they were able to talk to me, so I interviewed them pretty casually and just had them walk me through what their old workflow is, what it looked like, how the office was set up, who was doing the data entry. And you start to find things like sometimes the doctor who we thought we were selling to isn't the one who's really using any of the technologies we were trying to provide them. You know, maybe it's the nurse or the PA or the receptionist actually ended up doing a lot of work in that tool. And we were able to kind of pivot and sell things more to them than to the physicians who just, signed on the dotted line and then forgot about it because they didn't really like technology. We also learned things like physicians don't really read text on a page, right? They skim, they look for the bold text, they sign on the dotted line. That's what they're interested in doing, unless it's a, 5,000 page medical text. So when you sit down, you talk to these people, you build relationships, you become friends with them. I think it's really much more easy to take on their mindset. And then when you start talking about features, when you start talking about your UI, you can envision that person using it. You can really see it through their eyes. That kind of research to find your customer's pain can also be extended to recreating their old workflow, which would be really nice for you as a new PM. Get test accounts for competing products. Take a look at their UIs, see where there are challenges, see where there are good things. Shadow people as they use those tools, see what areas they click, what areas they're interested in. Take notes and kind of look for areas where the existing solution is falling short, where your product can really exploit that shortcoming so that you can surprise and delight your customers. As you work through the use cases, using the old tools, you will probably get frustrated and annoyed too. You'll probably say, why am I using a 5,000 line spreadsheet to do this? This is ridiculous. And feeling your pain and feeling that pain that your customers are in, I think also really helps connect you to who your customers are and what your purpose here as a product manager is. You're trying to help them do their job better. Another strategy for getting deeply familiar with your customers is to go where they go. I've found this to be really helpful in my current position in InfoSec. Visit conferences, attend local meetups, get on Slack channels, and don't stay in your booth or with your colleagues. Make sure to go out and listen to talks. Find content that you think could be applicable to your product. I've found you can discover a lot of feature design ideas from listening to existing problems that your customers are talking about. If you see that there are conversations and conference talks about a particular pain point, go try and solve that with a new feature. You can open up new sales opportunities pretty quickly that way. Hearing people describe their jobs and values in their own words is more helpful, I have found, than any persona, and it really gives you a deeper understanding and appreciation for who your customers are. When I started at Kenna Security, I knew almost nothing about InfoSec. They really took a chance on hiring a product manager without security experience, since it's such a deep, robust field. So I really wanted to immerse myself into the market, get up to speed quickly. I took the steps I outlined above, and I was able to really start grasping our value proposition within the first month. I started proposing impactful features within 3 months. I'm still learning, but every day I feel like I know a little bit more about what our customers really want out of our solution and what they value. So why go through all this trouble, right? Yes, you can be a product manager without getting intimately knowledgeable about your customer. You can totally phone it in as a PM and just do the things that you hear sales telling you about. But being a really great product manager requires it. When you get really passionate about your product, you'll fight harder for value-added features. You'll advocate on your customer's behalf more effectively. You'll think like the CEO. You'll think like the owner. And you'll make the right product decisions for your customers, not just for the board of directors or your sales team, for your customers. And when you're a great product manager, it really shows, right? The features you bring to market ring true for your customers. Sales has an easier time selling them. Your customers feel like they have a voice in your offering, that they are really being reflected back when they use your tool. In B2B software, your customers are looking for a solution to help them do their job better. If you fill that role, your current customer retention rate will increase, your sales purchase rate will increase, your sales team will love you. A good example, my current position at Kenna Security, I've really only existed as a product person here for a handful of months, but there's been a culture of knowing the customer at Kenna since it was created. And we employ experts in the field. We have a CTO who used to do what our customers do, and with that, knowing the customer culture, our retention rate is significantly higher than some of our SaaS industry benchmarks, and it continues to climb. The more you get in bed with your customer and know what they want, the easier it is to create impactful features and to resell to them. So to recap, there are a few things you can do to onboard as a new product manager to a new B2B industry quickly. Before you start, do as much research as possible. After you start, use your product, learn your technical build, meet your customers. Don't be afraid to propose features early into your job. You might get shot down, but that's okay. You will learn more about what people want and maybe some gaps in your knowledge about the product. Take it as a learning experience and move on and keep suggesting features and products. After you get to know your product, cultivate a passion for your product. Whether it's sales enablement technology, content management solution, security prioritization, your solution is helping people do their job more efficiently and more effectively. And that's really something to get behind. You want to make their job easier, their lives easier by using your tool. And I think knowing that and seeing how your product actually helps people be more effective at their job and do a better job can really build your passion for your product and really help you become a better product manager. And when your product team is passionate, it shows. You get better retention, your conversion rates go up, and your sales team will thank you. Okay, thanks for joining me today and listening to my opinions on product onboarding and cultivating passion. If you're interested in hearing more of my opinions, you can follow me on Twitter at epat6. And thanks very much again for joining the call.